Hey guys, what's up? John from VideoFort.com here, bringing you a new After Effects tutorial. This one is going to be covering particles and letters and randomness and lots of different things. Let's check out what we're going to be creating. So it's just going to render. There we go. We've got all these letters shooting out at us, and they're particles, and we got some rotations going on here. Now this is part one of a two-part tutorial lesson. I'm going to bring you guys up to this point to render out what we're checking out right now, and then we're going to continue on from there to create kind of a cool logo animation that's going to jump out at us in there. So this is going to bring us up to the rendering point for this exact piece of material. And yeah, it should be pretty sweet. So let's dive right into it. Oh, wait, let's wait for that to close. Oh, yeah, look at that, just zoom right back out. So yeah, let's get started and go into this. So we'll start out by going up to Composition, New Composition. And we're going to make a new comp. Let's go ahead and call this letters. And we're going to do it 150 by 150 pixels. And duration can be 20 seconds, 24 frames per second. We'll go ahead and say OK. Now from here, we are going to start making some letters. So we'll grab our text tool. And I'm going to use our good old copper plate text. Let's go ahead and check that out. Copper plate. And let's just go ahead and put the letter A. And that's good. And if we bring up the title safe, we can kind of center it. Sweet. And let's also increase the size of this to maybe, let's see how 120 looks. Yeah, we could probably even bring it up to like 140 maybe. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And then we'll just move it down a little bit so that it's recentered. Sweet. So from here, let's go ahead and make it white. Say OK. And we're going to make this 1 frame long. So let's go ahead and zoom in on our time here. And we're just going to go to 1 frame. And on our keyboard, we're going to press Option bracket. And that's going to cut down our length to 1 frame. So with our time indicator on 1 frame. From here, we're going to press Command D to duplicate it, or you can right click and choose to duplicate that. And then on our keyboard, we'll press the left bracket, and that'll shift this over. And what we're going to do is we're going to create 1 frame for each letter of the alphabet. So let's go ahead and go through and do that. I'm going to make that B. And I'll do the first 3 with us, and then once I've finished, or once we kind of get ourselves on our feet, you'll go ahead and just go through and do it on your own, because it's pretty straightforward. It's 1 letter, 1 frame. If you're having trouble understanding this concept, then maybe we need to choose a different tutorial. See how easy that is. We just got to make sure that we're moving it forward. So I hope you guys are getting the hang of it, because I am going to leave you here and rejoin you in, well, I don't know, however long this is going to take you. So maybe pause the video, and we will reconvene at a later time. Okay, so I've got all our letters here, and let's go ahead and trim our comp to the work area. or to the end of this. So we're going to go to, where's that at? 1 second. There are 24 letters in the alphabet. If you didn't know that, well, no worries, because neither did I. And we're just going to trim up our workspace now. So let's extend that so we can see our workspace. And if we hit N on the keyboard, that'll just bring our workspace over to there. And we'll just right-click, trim comp to work area. Sweet. And if we play this through, we can see that our letters go through. This is going to be getting used for our particular layer so that it can use all these random letters. So it's pretty awesome stuff. Now we're going to go up to Layer, New. We're going to create an adjustment layer. We're going to change this text a little bit so it looks nicer. So first thing that we're going to add to this adjustment layer is going to be a ramp. So let's go ahead and generate one of those. We'll just search for ramp and we'll just jump right off it. And kapow! We've got a ramp generated. Let's go ahead and bring our gradient down so that it's right at the tops of these letters. And there we go. That looks spiffy. And don't worry about any of those other settings, because who cares? Well, someone does, but we don't right now. So then we'll go back over to our effects and presets and add Colorama. It's such a fun one. I always feel like I'm going on a trip or doing some sort of hallucinogen whenever I throw this on. Alright, and we're going to drop down Output Cycle. And we're just going to change it to Golden 1. And also go down to Modify and uncheck Modify Alpha. And that'll kind of give us less of that rough, goofy looking edge there. And we'll just go ahead and close that. Now, we want this to look kind of chrome-like, so we're going to add a tint on here, and that'll make it black and white. Unfortunately, Colorama does not have a silver setting. No idea why. So that'll give us kind of like a silvery look. Silvery. That's a fun word. Say it 3 times. I'm not going to. And let's go ahead and add a bevel. So if we go to bevel, and we'll add bevel alpha, that'll give us some more shape. And last but certainly not least, we are going to add a curves layer. And if you guys watched one of my previous tutorials on flaming text, we used the same technique to create some chrome looking text. So check that one out if you want to set some things on fire. So let's go ahead and bring this up all the way to the top, and then we're going to drag one down, and we're going to drag another all the way back up to the top, and we're going to drag another back down, and drag back up to the top, and I'm going to move this over just a hair, and this one too. So yeah, just create a couple loops there. And you will get kind of a cool chrome look. And you can move these different points around to give you different shading and things like that to make it more metallic. Not Metallica. I don't want them, getting angry for anything. They are known for that. So yeah, we've got our letters set up, and they've got some cool color to them. We can even move these around a bit if we want. No big deal either way. They're going to change it very slightly, so I wouldn't bother with that. Let's go ahead and create a new comp. So we'll go up to Composition, New, And let's name this letter explosion. Sweet. And we'll make it 1920 by 1080. 24 frames, 20 seconds. Okay. And if we go into our project window, we are going to grab our letters comp that we just created and drop it in there. Now, we don't want to have this visible because we're just going to be using this for our particles, so we can turn it off as soon as we get it into there. Now, let's go ahead and go up to Layer, New, Solid. And we're going to call this Fractal Noise, and guess what? We're going to add some fractal noise to it. How does that sound? Say OK there. And let's go ahead and search for fractal noise over here. Fractal noise. We'll just double click on that and that'll add it to our space. Now let's go ahead and go up to our effects controls and change some of these settings. So we're going to change noise type from soft linear to spline. And then underneath contrast, we're going to bring that up to 280. I'm just going to crank that up, create it super high contrast. We're going to bring down the brightness right about there. Looks good. Keep that the same. Complexity, we're going to crank up a little bit. Bring that to about 20 maybe, if we can get it up there. I'm just going to type it in. Boom. Done. Set. Let's tick down transform and we'll change the scale. We do not want it to be uniform because who wears uniforms? Let's make this 400 and the height will crank up to 800. That's given us that. You'll notice as we scrub through though, nothing's really happening with our noise. It's kind of stagnant and nothing's happening here. How do we change that? Well, we change that by adding in an expression. That's right, an expression, guys. We're still using them, still working with them. You really need to do it, and we're going to focus on the evolution. So let's go ahead and option click our evolution stopwatch. And this is a good expression to know. It's a time expression, so we're going to type in time times 150. And that will animate this expression for us by moving the evolution forward in time times 150. So that's what it's doing for us. And I can even RAM preview this so that you guys can have some safety of mind knowing exactly what's going on here. Isn't that super amazing? That's pretty much our whole animation done for us. Two other small things we're going to do is set up some keyframes. So if we go to the 2-second mark, we will set a keyframe for the opacity. So if we select fractal noise and press T on the keyboard, that'll bring up our opacity values. So we'll set a keyframe at 2 and make it 0%. And then we'll go to our 4-second and set a keyframe for 100%. So that'll just crank it all the way up. And that's just going to do an opacity value change up to 100%. Very valuable stuff. From here, we will create another new layer solid. We'll call this one lens flare. And hey, guess what we're going to put into it? A lens flare. So if we just search over on our effects and presets for lens flare, and look at that. Got it right there. Boom. Done. It's on there. We're going to move our flare to just underneath the center point here. Right about there. That looks good to me. And let's head over to the effects controls here. we're going to change the brightness to a higher brightness. We're going to bring that up to 120. Make it super duper bright. It's so bright. And let's throw some other effects onto there. We're going to go to our Effects and Presets panel, type in Tint. We'll throw a tint on there. Won't change anything. And let's also throw a curves to make it more contrasting. Curves. And we're just going to kind of do an S shape here, so do that and that. Now we got a nice contrasting black and white lens flare going on there. And let's soften up this a little bit. We're going to look for a fast blur as opposed to a slow blur. And let's go ahead and just crank up that blurriness till some of that definition goes away. Right about there looks good. And repeat edge pixels just in case, and collapse that. So we've got it. What we're going to do with this is make the fractal noise a lumimat for it. So go to lumimat, and now we've got that going on. So our lens flare kind of creates a light behind our fractal noise and creates some cool looking stuff back there. We're going to set some keyframes for our lens flare. Let's go ahead and select our lens flare and press T on the keyboard to bring up the opacity and set some determined keyframes. And set some keyframes. So if we go to 4, and I'm going to push it one frame back, I want to be 4 exactly. And if you look right here, this is where you can see where we're at as far as the timeline goes. Also shows you over here in case anybody was confused. You know, really good stuff to know. And we'll set our first keyframe at 4 seconds, and it'll be 100%. And we'll go to 6 seconds. Yeah, let's make sure we're right at 6. We're going to drop it down to 45%. And we'll go to 8. And we'll simply just set another keyframe for 45. So to do that, we'll just press right here, and that'll set another keyframe for us. And we'll go to 10 and set a keyframe for 65. And then we'll go to 11. Oh wow, I clicked exactly, got lucky on that one. And drop it down to 0. And I'm going to go to 12 and set the end. Let's go ahead and play this back real fast, and you can kind of see what's happening now with our comp. So you see our keyframes have kind of animated this background and is making it look a little cool. This is all set up for the second part of our tutorial, but we need to do it now in the beginning process before we start getting particles thrown into there. Otherwise it'll be just a little more confusing to try to keyframe at a later point in time. All these keyframes are coordinated with the particles, and we're going to be keyframing those once we get them going. So pretty much what this is going to be looking like is kind of like this here. So I can get to a point in time on my comp. So we kind of have that light in the center, and all these letters are around it, and you know, we'll get there. We'll get there. But this is just the primary setup, so let's go ahead and go back to our lens flare, and we'll duplicate that. So you can press Command D on your keyboard, or you can right click and choose to duplicate it in there, or go up and choose File, Duplicate. You know, lots of different things you can do. Let's go ahead and name this lens flare 2. We're going to bring back the flare brightness to 100%, and we're also going to bring up the blurriness to 200. So it's quite a drastic change. Now with lens flare 2 selected, press U on your keyboard, and that'll bring up all the keyframes for its value. And we're just going to turn off the opacity keyframes, bring that back up to 100%. This one is going to do some different opacity value changes. This flare, and let's make sure we turn it on so we can see it. This specific flare is going to be kind of like a explosion flare, so it'll be, you know, kind of going up and down in the center, and then our letters are going to explode and it'll go bright and, you know, do some cool stuff. So let's figure out where to set the keyframes for this one. Okay, so let's go ahead and set some of the keyframes. We'll go ahead and go up to our flare brightness, and at the 1 second mark, so we'll go to 1 second. So I'm at 1. We'll set our first keyframe for the flare brightness, and that is going to be 0%. So we'll take that down to 0. Then we're just going to move forward 7 frames, so I can click on here and choose to go forward 7 frames. We're going to crank that back up to 90. Oops. Put that at 90. Then we're going to move forward in time again to 117, so that's just 10 frames forward. And we'll bring it down to 0. Then back up to 100 at 210. So set that back to 100. So that's our keyframes for the flare brightness, and if we press U on our keyboard with lens flare 2 selected, we can see all those keyframes made. Now let's go ahead and press Shift T, and that'll show our opacity values, and let's go to the 8 second mark and set a keyframe for 30% for our opacity. So set our keyframe, and we'll type in 30%. Then we'll go forward to 10 seconds. Just move back 1. And we're going to increase this to 55. And then we'll go to 11 seconds and decrease this to 0. We'll fade off. So now we've got some nice animation set up for that lens flare. Let's go ahead and change the mode on here to add, and then we're going to duplicate this lens flare again. So press Command D on your keyboard, or File, Duplicate, so on and so forth. And with this lens flare selected, we're going to drop it beneath lens flare 2. You notice it already renamed itself lens flare 3, which is nice. We're going to increase the brightness to 125. So it's going to be slightly brighter. Now all these stay the same except for fast blur. We're going to bump that up super high to like 500. That's good there. And then we're going to change the mode to screen. And this is just going to give us, you know, a little variation on the lights. So one other thing that we can do to our added lens flares is change the coloring on them. So if we go to our curves layer and we drop down the channel, I'm going to make it a blue. So we're going to go to the blue channel, and I'm just going to kind of drag this over, and you see we've got some blue coming through. To even out a little bit, we can select our green channel and maybe bring that over. I'll add just some contrasting. Let's also get red in the mix to there we go, that looks beautiful. And then we'll just simply copy and paste this curves layer to our second lens flare. And boom, there we have it. We've got a bluish light in the center. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's add some particles. So we'll go up to Layer, New, Solid. We're going to name this Large Parts and say OK. And let's add our particular effect. And boom, we've got our beautiful particles there. Okay, and with your particular added, let's go ahead and start changing some of these effects controls. So, we are going to be keyframing the particles per second, but we'll move past that for right now. Let's make sure our emitter type is set at point. We'll make the Z position 5,000. That'll push it away from us in the distance, really far. And we're going to change the Y rotation to 180. That'll turn our particle world just a little bit for us. Velocity random we'll keep at 20, distribution at 0.5, and velocity from motion we can keep at 20. Just keep moving on down the line. We'll go into particle, and we're going to change the life to 15. That'll make our particles stay around for a little bit longer. And we're also going to change particle type to textured polygon. Now remember when we brought in our letters, the very first thing, this is where they're going to come into play. So with textured polygon selected, we'll go to texture, and we're going to select our letters layer, and we're going to make it random. Whoa. Random still frame. And we'll keep the seed at 1. And if we increase the size here to 100, we can see our letters. How awesome. And they're all just kind of jumbled in there right now. Super duper, gang. If we increase size random to about 20, that'll give us variation in the sizes, which will be nice. And size over life, let's change that. So we're going to choose this one here. And if we just take our mouse and drag straight over, we can kind of just color in the rest of that area. So that'll give us that. And then if we choose, let me move this over just a little bit so you guys can see it. There we go. If we choose copy, we can copy this little graph here, and we'll go ahead and drop down the opacity over life, and we'll hit paste here, and that'll give us the same graph, which is real convenient. And we'll just keep on moving down the line. We are going to drop down our rotation settings here, and we want to rotate the x-axis 30 degrees. We'll rotate our y-axis 60. And finally, the z-axis will rotate 25. That's going to give our letters kind of like a skewed look there, but if we bring the random rotation up to 100, that'll kind of animate our keys and offset them and, you know, make them all crazy like and wild. So I know that's exactly what we're looking to do, get wild. Let's go ahead and drop down shading, and we're going to turn our shading on. We need to change our light fall off to none AE. And we're going to do a couple different changes in our settings here. We'll make that 100 for ambient. We'll diffuse it down to 50. We want our specular amount up to 20. And our specular sharpness down to 50. And so that should give us some cool looking particles. Now all we have to do is keyframe our particle layer, and that should be pretty easy to do. Let's go ahead and start out. So if we go back up to the top here, wow. So we'll go to our particles per second, and actually let's go ahead and move forward to 110 on our keyboard here, so we can just enter it in up here. I'm going to put in 10, 1, oh, 1. Alright, and we're going to move our animation over to there. So if I press the left bracket on the keyboard, that'll just shift over this whole thing. So we're going to start at 110, and with our particles per second selected, let's go to the 7 seconds and 14 frames, and we are going to set our first keyframe for our particles per second at 100, and then we're going to go to 8 seconds and set it to 0. And that's all the keyframing we need to do for the particles per second. Let's head down to velocity, and at 414, so if we go to the 4-second mark, and let's just go ahead and add a 14 onto the end of there, we're going to set our velocity to 3,500. So that's a really high velocity. We're going to be going wild and out of control. That's going to be kind of like our burst. And then if we go to the 5-second and 14, go ahead and change that down to 0. That'll take our velocity down. And those are all our keyframes for velocity. Let's check out some wind controls. That's going to be all the way down underneath physics. So if we drop physics down, and then air, we got our wind controls here. So at 5:14, which is where we're at right now, we're going to set a keyframe for our wind Z position. So let's go ahead and turn that on. And this is going to be negative 3,500. We're going to go to the 7 and 14 frames mark. And we're going to set our wind Z to 0. And another thing we want to do is make it an ease to ease keyframe. So if we select our large parts and press U on the keyboard, that'll show us all the keyframes we've been making. And we want this specific keyframe to be an easy ease keyframe. So if we press F9 on our keyboard, that'll change it to what we want it. And then let's move forward to 9 seconds. And we're going to set another keyframe at 0. And then at 10 seconds, we're going to bring it all the way up to its highest, which is 10,000. That'll kind of bring all the letters back. We're also going to change the effect position. So if we drop down turbulence field, we can see effect position here. And at 7:14, we will set a keyframe for 0. So we can just do 0 there. And then we're going to move to 9:14, and we're going to make it 800. And let's go and make that 800. And those are the keyframes for effect position. Last thing we're going to do is set the opacity. So if we Press U on our keyboard, U again, that'll show us all the keyframes we've set, and then Shift T will bring up our opacity values. Now if we go to 110, which is the beginning of this little animation, go ahead and set our first keyframe for opacity, make it 0%. Then if we move forward to 119, we can set another keyframe for 100%, and that'll turn our particles on. Now we'll just move over to 1117, so I'll just type that in here. And we're going to drop another keyframe, so we'll just hit that, and then we'll go to 12 and drop it down, so that's good. And we'll make that 0. Awesome, so we've got our large particles flying out. We can't see any of them though, so we need to add some lights to this workspace. So if we go up to Layer, New, Light, and we're going to make it a point light, and you can make it whatever coloring you really want, and we're going to say OK. Okay, and that's going to give us some nice lighting for this scene, and let's start repositioning this light. We're going to actually make 5 lights in total, so let's just make them right now. And I did that just by pressing Command D on the keyboard. You can also go up to File, Duplicate to make 5 lights. So let's start repositioning these. I'm going to do one on the right side, left side, top, bottom, and then in the center pushed way far back. So this first light, we're just going to bring down on the Y position and bring over on the X. And if I press P on the keyboard with this selected, I can see the position points. So I want this to be actually right at 1500, so I'm just going to write in 1500. And if I press Tab, it'll go to the next value. I want that exactly at 500, and this one to be at -500. Awesome, so we've got that one set. Let's go to light 2. And I'm just going to copy this position and paste it onto light 2. So if I press P and do Command V, and that'll paste the position points. Except this one I want to be at 380, so that'll be at the other side. So I'm just going to throw it over there. See how easy that was? And then I'll go ahead and press Command C to copy that position, and we'll do Command V on light 3, press P to bring up the position points. And this one is going to get changed, the X value to 960, and that'll bring it over center. And second value is going to be at 1000. So we'll put 1000, and that should bring it up to the top. Oh, excuse me, the bottom. And with light 4, so if we Command C to copy the position points, we'll do that to 4. And we're going to make this 100, and that'll bring it to the top. So our last light, light 5, is going to actually have an intensity change, so we'll drop down the light options. And we're going to bring the intensity up to 150. And we want to make sure this is centered, so let's make this 960. And then this is going to be 540. And we're going to push it way back in Z space, so we'll do -2000. And I'll just kind of be like a backlight. And so now we can see all our letters, which is good. And we don't need to see these lights anymore, so we can select all of them. And then toggle switches modes. And see right here, we're going to change this to a hide or a shy layer. And over here, we're going to press this, and that'll hide our lights in our comp area, so we don't have to worry about clicking on them and all that business. Alright, so let's go ahead and duplicate our large parts particle layer, and we're going to make them medium-sized parts. So if we change the name of this to medium parts, For med parts, I'm going to do that. And we're going to change a couple of the settings over here. If we go down to the particles per second, or go over to the particles per second, we'll press U on our keyboard to bring up the keyframes, and we want to get on keyframe, or at the 714 time position, and we'll change our particles per second to 300. That'll give us way more particles. Then we're going to go down to the size and change size to 35. And size random we're going to put up to 40. Then if we go down to our rotations under our world transform, we are going to do a negative 45-degree rotation on that. That'll turn our world a little bit to give it a little different perspective. And those are all the changes we need to make for that one, except bringing it to the 1 second marker. So let's go over to 1 second. And with medium part selected, we'll press the left bracket on our keyboard, and that'll shift everything over. So that'll start just a little bit before our large particles start. And let's go ahead and duplicate this particle layer and rename it small parts. And change the settings for that. And before we change the settings for this, I just remembered for medium particles, we also need to go into the rotation underneath particle and switch that up a little bit. So we're going to change this to the X value to 50, Y value to 20, and the Z value to 80. And that's going to change how the particles are rotating and just give us more dynamic movement, which is always what we're looking for. Alright, so back to the small particle effects controls. Underneath particles per second, we're going to make it 1500, really ramping them up now, especially since they are smaller. All these are going to stay the same, and we're going to continue on down to the size. So underneath here, we are going to make the size 15 and size random 20. Then if we go under the rotation, we'll go under the X rotation, we'll make this 120. Underneath Y, we will make it 45. And underneath Z, we will make it, let's see here, 15. Let's go with that. And if I move forward in time a little bit, we can kind of see how our particles are looking. And it'll take a second to render this to see it. But you see we're getting a really cool, dynamic, crazy looking world there. Let's go ahead and change our last thing here, our Z rotation. We're going to make that 90. And we are all set. So we've got our particles in there. I know it was a little time consuming with all those keyframes. Those will all come handy in our next lesson, but this finishes up for setting up the particles. Now what you're going to want to do is render out just the particles. So let's turn off all our other layers. And with those turned off, we are going to render out this composition with the alpha channel. So we're going to go up to Composition, Pre-Render. And we'll keep it as Letter Explosion, but we're going to call it Parts. And we're going to make this a PNG sequence, so you're also going to want to make a new folder and maybe name it the same thing, so Letter Parts or something like that. And this is going to be where your PNG sequence goes. If you haven't worked with a PNG sequence before, think of it as a bunch of pictures, and each picture represents a frame. So this is a PNG sequence here, and
each of those represents a frame in your project, so that's what you're going to be rendering out. And we'll just go ahead and save it to there. Nope, and we don't want to name it small particles. We want to name it letter parts. Sweet. And then you're also going to go over to the output module, and up at format you're going to change it from QuickTime to PNG sequence. You're going to make sure that the RGB plus alpha is selected, and then you're going to go to format options and you're going to choose to have it be interlaced. You're going to say OK, and that is good, and then you just say OK, and you can start to render out this project. Now there's one other way to render it out, and you can do that using a great script called AE Render. To use that, you can go to a website, check out the previous video that I made on AE Render, and there's all the information on it there. So good stuff, and you'll be able to continue to work inside of After Effects if you use AE Render. So check it out, and that'll help render out this project a little quicker. This is going to take a very long time to render. Expect it to take up to 5 hours, maybe even longer if you have a slower computer. This is one of those projects that you have to be patient on, and it's pretty rewarding at the end though, because you get a really cool effect with lots of particles. So yeah, render that out and come back for part 2, where we're going to learn how to throw in some title animation and make this really cool and fun, because that's what we like to have here. Make sure to go over to VideoFort.com in the meantime and check out some awesome stock footage there. You can use all of that stock footage to make your projects look super great and amazing. Also, click on subscribe. That's the best way to stay up to date with all these tutorials, and that way you're not going to miss out on part 2 of this awesome little animation we've got going here. Otherwise, guys, make sure to have a great day, or not. The choice is yours. Later, guys.